My talk today is in dim light here, so I may stumble around a bit. The ideal rules for a new program is that the school buys an instructional program that it believes will work well. I mean, that's the ultimate reason they're bought. The program is supposed to deliver the goods, right? It's not the test, it's not some other ancillary activities. It's the program you use every day in the school. And then the big question is, why isn't the program ever evaluated? That's a pretty good question. In this scheme, the school tries out the program. Does it install it with all the kids? No, that's against the rules. You don't introduce a new program unless it outperforms the program you're using now. So you have to try it out with a representative group of students and then evaluate it. I mean, objectively evaluate it according to everything it teaches. So you teach the program the program is taught to all the kids in the tryout group, and then the primary test at the end of the year consists of everything the program taught in the form it was taught. Why do you test it in that form? Because that's the way it was taught in the program. You like the program taught it that way. Why don't you see if your kids learned it? If they didn't, there's a problem. If they did, there's no problem. Things are looking good. So the rule is that the school keeps the program that works best. If the tryout program is better than the other one, you keep the tryout program and you throw out the other one, the one you've had. If the extant program is better, you keep that one and discard the tryout program. And there's no problem with the school trying out more than one program at a time, but it has to follow these rules. And this simple cycle, if it existed, would completely revolutionize instruction, testing, and program development, because schools would not be able to go from a program that works well to a program that's inferior. And yet that's what happens too often, so often that it's like almost a story with DI. It's not a question of whether it will happen, it's just a question of when. So over the years, we've turned around some pretty low-performing schools, so they are pretty amazing. And they stayed amazing as long as the principal or the superintendent or the person who's honchoing the program was in charge. And when that person left, then the program went what we call downhill. Because it was rejected and replaced by some other program. And they did that in Chicago several times. We had 2 great implementations in Chicago in really at-risk neighborhoods, and the performance was super. And yet I was reading some stuff about Chicago's history in education just recently, and there was no acknowledgement that they ever even used DI, and yet it outperformed everything they had. So that's that story, and I'm sticking to it, what the heck. But it's sad, but it would be corrected. It would not be possible if you had that one simple formula. You test the program you adopt. You don't test something else with some foreign test of some kind. You test whether the kids have been taught the material in the program. And if that program outperforms the program you have now, ta-da, you throw out the program you have now. So what needs to change in education, oh dear, this is high tech. I had to press the space bar to do that. I mean, I don't know. And I did it. I mean, that's the good news. Thank you. Hey, I'll do it many times, hopefully. So what needs to change in education? A guy the other day told me he's very knowledgeable about the trends in education and DI, and he said It'll be 100 years before they get it right. 100 years. Let me guess. We don't want to wait that long. But 100 years. Why would it take so long? Well, in the first place, and he pointed this out, and it's totally valid, the philosophy of instruction needs to merge with the philosophy of behavioral psychology. Why do they need to merge? Because they're the same. They do the same thing. And yet, here, behavioral psychology is in psychology, and psychology is in science. So let me see, here we go. Okay, we've been there. I don't see, yikes. Where's the still keep going? Okay. The basis for the merger of the first census. Oh, yeah. Okay, predicted behavioral changes are caused by manipulating environmental variables. That's how they're the same. In both areas, you predict behavioral changes, and you achieve those by causing, not correlating, causing, by manipulating environmental variables, not brain stems or things like that that have nothing to do with it, but just the environmental variables, like instruction, it would be the material you present. For teaching a chimp to do a double back somersault by shaping the behavior through rewards and reinforcing approximations and so forth, until you get the behavior you want. But you're using environmental variables to cause changes in behavior. And if you lose any parts of that, then you lose the whole formula. That the behavior is predicted ahead of time. It's nothing that just happens. And it's not that there'll be some amorphous change. You need to predict specific things that will happen. And they're changed. The organism is totally changed with this new behavior. And it is caused, not correlated. We don't see two groups and one, has smarter parents than the other, and the one with smarter parents has smarter kids. Therefore, we'll change everybody so their parents are smarter. No, I don't know that we can do that. So we're going to have to kind of reject that notion. I mean, we don't reject the findings, but we reject that the correlation has anything to do other than with the correlation. But it wasn't caused. This was not caused by some environmental thing. It's just correlated. So these have to be caused, the change has to occur, and achieved by manipulating environmental variables, not brain stems or whatever. So, here we go. Can you see that there, guy? Yeah. Currently, behavioral psychology and philosophy is classified as a science. There you got your science, there you got your psychology ring, and inside psychology somewhere, there's behaviorism. Wow, that's pretty good. And the status as a science means that behaviorism is endorsed and embraced by smart people as something legitimate. It's part of science. And the philosophy of science is very sophisticated. I mean, it's not primitive, it's not romantic, it's not old-fashioned. But if we move ahead, instruction is classified as something related to knowledge. That's epistemology, for what it's worth. That's the study of knowledge. And it's not clearly defined. So here you've got your epistemology. Somewhere in there you have education. It kind of floats too. But instruction really floats because it's not even defined. The status of being related, vaguely related to knowledge, means that instruction is something like the ball used in the game Think Ball. Do you know the game Think Ball? Think about it. Is that a real ball? I don't think so. It's just thinking. And that's what they do in this branch of science. There's a lot of postulated thinking, what ifs. And the rational mind, goes in many directions, unfortunately. But they have all kinds of, extensive arguments before we get to the ideal. One of the arguments has to do with qualia. The question is this: when you learn have new sensory experiences, do you learn something generically new, different? And these are called qualia, and then they go back to little scenarios. Mary grows up in this room, and she never sees any color but red. So when she sees other colors, will that be a qualia, or will it just be a simple logical extension of what she already knows about red? Hell of a question. Who cares? I mean, it may make a difference to Mary, but I don't know that this is a big-time issue. But if they wanted to look at it seriously, they could go to a related question that has broader applications. What about blind people who learn to see when they're adults? I mean, are qualia involved there? Yeah, and I was at this experiment once that showed just how enormous the qualia were. I mean, the friggin' qualia were flying all around the place. Here's what happened. This was in a reactor lab, and they had this huge screen taller than this room, and they had capital letter A on it, illuminated so that we all had to wear black glasses to observe it, or we'd be blinded by the light. And this woman was blind. She was, in her early 20s, and she could see barely diffuse light. And they figured she would be able to see capital A. And so here they were. They lit it up. Boom! Are you kidding me? Even with the black glasses, it was incredible. And they asked her, can you see capital A? She said, yes, and she cocked her head a couple of times and looked confused. And she said, but I thought it would look really different. And they said, what do you mean? And she said, I thought it would look like this. And the guy sitting next to me said, what, is she nuts? She made a perfect capital A. But yeah, she knew capital A, she knew size and distance and capital A by feeling, but how did she know what this part of it looked like, or this part of it looked like, or this part of it looked? She had nothing to correlate it with. So she had no basis for knowing what the vision would look like. And as a matter of fact, people who have their sight restored when they're adults have a hell of a time trying to learn to see, especially going downstairs. Many of them, years after their sight has been restored, they close their eyes when they go downstairs so they're not totally confused by the changes in visual scenery. Anyhow, the ideal would be, the philosophical ideal would be that science would be the main topic, and inside you would have this instruction behaviorism, which is the same thing. I mean, different aspects or extensions of the same process. It's an empirical process that involves what? Manipulating environmental variables to cause predicted changes in behavior. Heck of a deal. So that would be the ideal. That's probably what would have to happen, just in terms of knowledge systems of what instruction actually is. In addition to that, or there would be benefits. Behavioral psychology is removed, in this case, from that part of psychology that involves physiology and other aspects of the mind that don't involve causing behaviors. For instance, like left brain, right brain, and whether people are a visual learner or an auditory learner or a kinesthetic learner. And they've done studies on these, and they all prove negative, that these things don't even exist as such, and yet they're topics. Instruction would be a science and would acquire the proper apparel of a science. Right now, it has none. The procedures and endorsements would be valid because it would be governed by theories of science that would cause legitimacy, so that they couldn't do crazy stuff like teach one thing and then test something else and draw some correlational relationship between the two. Hell no, you teach this, you test this, and you draw a conclusion about your teaching. And that's the loop right there. Get this stuff out of here. And yet with the Common Core standards, it's going to be years before they get this straight. They probably won't really have any testing for 3 or 4 years. Who knows? Because they don't know. But they're just finding out that teachers don't know how to teach the standards, and it's going to take a lot for them to teach the standards. The standards are a lure, and they may be alluring to some. Here's one Common Core standard. Use a combination of drawing, dictating, and writing to narrate. This is for K, kindergarten kids, those little guys. Standard 3, combination of drawing, dictating, and writing to narrate a single event or several loosely linked events. Tell about the events in order in which they occurred and provide a reaction to what happened. Wow. Okay, let's cause that outcome. Where do we start? I mean, how do we assure that the kid can kind of write the words that he's trying to say? He's a kindergarten kid, and he may want to say some loopy words here. How does he get that? Does somebody write them for him? Or does he use approximation? Or is this time for a drawing? Put a drawing in there. And who does this? Who honchos this kids? How many teachers do we have in this classroom? And what kind of kids are they? I don't know. I haven't seen kids like this. But I could see this activity if there's only one teacher and about 3 aides taking like close to this side of forever to get it done. And then what would you have? What would the kids have learned? How does it relate to what they've learned in the past? And how does it generalize? One of the simple rules of instruction is that you teach kids everything they need to know to get to point X. And then once you've taught them that thing, you generalize it to a maximum extent so it's used in a lot of variable ranges so that they get a great deal of practice in using it. And then it becomes often a component in something more complicated. So you're moving both systematically and efficiently. And if you don't do both, you're not going to teach a hell of a lot during this year. You may have a lot of, kind of like half-illustrated monster things laying around here, but you're not going to have a lot of product to show that your kids learn much. So that's pretty sad. Let's fast forward ahead to grade 1 standard. Has to be better, right? Oh, sure. Right narrative. No more help and pictures, just right narratives in which they, those are the students, recount 2 or more appropriately sequenced events, include some detail regarding what happened, use temporal words to signal event order, and provide some sense of closure. That's the part I like the most. You can't go from here to there without closure. What the hell does that mean? No, I mean, what sense of closure? Boy, I had a sense of closure, just this kind. Get rid of them standards. No, but the standards are clearly naive, and they're clearly not going to work, and they'll clearly waggle on them, and it'll clearly affect instruction. And one of the bigger problems is that no longer will we have standards for, I said this is writing, but there aren't just standards for writing. There is no field called reading anymore. There are evaluations that will take place for language arts. And if you miss any part of it, you fail in language arts. And then the math is simpler in the sense of structure, but I mean to organize things in that manner is terrible. I mean, it means that you're just making it virtually impossible for schools to pass the test or know what to pass, so that there's going to be a lot of poor communication. Our reality, this affects us a lot, because we're here and we're now. The bottom line of our reality is this, and I've said this a lot of times, and I'm willing to take any school district up on this as a wager that we can turn around any school, no matter how poorly it performs, no matter how low it is, turn it around thoroughly in 3 years if we have full control over the school. In other words, complete cooperation from the principal and staff and the ability to change it. I mean, I know we can because we've done it under circumstances less beneficial than those. But it can be done, and we have the power to do it. We honestly do. It revolves around programs, and if the programmatic details are in place and the training is in place and kids are properly placed in programs, other things happen. They fall out naturally, and kids perform better and better so that they become accelerated. And it will happen. And I offered Chicago several times, I made a wager with them. I gave them odds, but nobody has ever taken me up on it. And I find that insulting, because we have data to show that I'm not just whistling Dixie here. I mean it. We could do it, and it can be done. No kidding. You'd be amazed at how easy it is, because you have some teachers who are resistant because they want to do something else, and once they know that's not an option, most of them let go of it and give it a go. And when they give it a go, then they start seeing some of the rewards that result from reaching kids and doing things they had never been able to do before. And for others, they probably, best move on to some other place, but that's okay. If they want to stay here, they don't have the option of doing things their way. They have to do it the way we'll do it together and the way it's organized so that it, provides maximum benefits for the kids. And then within 2 years, enormous changes occur. So we have the tools and the confidence. And the basis for the confidence is knowledge that we could do it, and we'd be glad to do it. I mean, we're here primarily to help. We want to help teachers, and we want to help kids. And it is becoming very, very difficult to do that, particularly with the advent of the new standards and the pressures and partly the economy, but like sales and in the products we design are down. And what that means to me is we're not reaching as many schools, as many kids, and as many teachers as we should be reaching. And that's unfortunate because I don't know of other places or other approaches that can help them. I mean, honestly, I know some that are good adjuncts or additions, but they are not core programs that will really take the kids where they are and move them out. We have a realistic, but us now leaving this place, we don't want to leave it with our daubers down. You had a good week, you learned a lot, and you're in a position to do good. And you can do good now. And so I think the bottom line rule is we have to have a realistic understanding of where our kids currently are, where they need to go, and how to engineer every step. We have that knowledge, and hopefully you have more of it now in the areas that you studied during the conference than you had earlier. So recognize that careful sequences teach everything students need and apply everything that is taught. And that's not just words. That everything they need to do to get to point X in the program is taught. And when they get those skills and reach point X, they don't just apply it to X. They now apply the skills they've learned to a variety of other things that they can now tackle because of their increased proficiencies and skills. We have a central role in this teaching. We have to add the integrity and the unyielding persistence that we talked about in the opening to assure that we serve all the students now. We don't have the luxury of doing it later. It's got to be done now. So I would really feel good if you guys could go out and apply what you've learned and give it all you've got. And I remember two things that I didn't say in the opening that I should probably say, or it'll bother me all year long. It will. Oh, well, I shouldn't say that, as long as my memory's working. Okay, with Margot, I said how great she was when I saw her that one time. And she was teaching the kids. None of them could spell the word vacation. And she said, wow, vacation is a hard word, but I can spell it. It's V-A-C-A-T-I-O-N. Listen again, V-A-C-A-T-I-O-N. Say it with me, V-A-C-A-T-I-O-N. What word? Vacation. One more time. Vacation. V-A-C-A. Yes. What word? Yes. No, it was beautiful. I mean, it was like, yes, that's what Margot, it was so different from the way she taught before. She'd have been insulted that they couldn't do the VACATION, vacation. Thank you, Margot. And Killian, I didn't tell one of the instances that she had with her kids. She took her kids to the Houston Medical Center as fourth graders, and they started to give them the kiddie lecture, and she said they'd already learned many of the bones in the body, the muscle anatomy, the circulatory system, and a whole bunch of details that are in like the corrective and the upper programs. And she said, just pretend like you have first-year graduate students and give the regular full-blown lecture. Okay, so they did, and afterwards, like 4 or 5 of them gathered around because the kids were so impressive, and they all agreed that was the smartest group that ever came through in terms of the questions they asked and how they performed. So, hope you have stuff to take home with you. Do it the right way. Here we go. Thank you.